Alrighty, good afternoon, SCTA RCPA Board of Directors. We'll be taking roll and we'll start with Director Melanie Bagby.
Present.
Director Chris Corsi.
Here.
Director Delinda Fischer.
Here.
Director Gerard Giudice.
Here.
Director Sarah Gurney had informed me that she would not be able to make this meeting today. Director Linda Hopkins.
Present.
Director Ariel Kelly.
Here.
Director Mark Landman. I see him on the list. Director Sandra Lowe.
Here.
Director David Rabbit.
Here.
Director Rosa Reynosa.
Here.
And Chair Chris Rogers.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and start with public comment for non-agenda items. If you have a comment that falls within this jurisdiction for SCTA RCPA but is not on our calendar for today, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom. We'll start with Eris Weaver.
All right, Eris, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. It's Eris Weaver, Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. Several of you probably already know about this, but in case you didn't, I am just so happy to hear that the cities of Petaluma and Santa Rosa have received a grant of, well, a technical assistance grant from City Thread, which is composed of some very well-known and very well-experienced cycling advocates to accelerate build out of bicycle networks throughout the two cities. A lot of neighborhood groups and folks have been working to raise money and energy and support to get this to happen. And we're just really excited for what that is possibly going to look like as it comes down the pike. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Eris. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on items not on the agenda, nor did I receive any pre-submitted public comments as well.
Perfect. I'll bring it back then. And Madam Executive Director, do you want to run through the consent calendar for today?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do have a number of items on consent under the SCTA RCPA concurrent items. We've got the meeting notes from October 10th. There's also a new resolution to authorize teleconference meetings in compliance with AB 361. Since we did not meet last month, it requires a new resolution. The 2023 meeting schedule for the board and all of our advisory committees is included, as well as the first quarter financial reports, the fiscal year 21-22 audits for SCTA and RCPA, as well as 3 resolutions of commendations for our outgoing directors. That's directors Gurney, Landman, and Fischer. And then there are also some an item under RCPA, an agreement with the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, and then SCTA items related to our contract amendment with Fair and Peers for travel modeling work, at 3 Measure M cooperative agreements, and a report that's included under consent on project delivery, updating the federal funding obligation by each project sponsor.
All right, thank you so much. So before we get into the 3 commendations for our outgoing directors, I want to see if there's any questions on the rest of the consent calendar. Okay, seeing none. We do have 3 members who unfortunately will not be with us next year. We have, of course, directors Mark Landman, Delinda Fischer, and then, as you heard, Sarah Glade Gurney. Sarah sent us an email earlier today. She is with her daughter awaiting the birth of her grandkid, and so a very good reason for her not to be here. But I did want to give our other 2 directors a chance to say a few words, and then if anybody would like to make some comments, outgoing for them as well. Director Landman, Director Fischer, who wants to start? I think I saw Delinda go, him. So we'll start with you, Director Landman.
I thought I gave a good head fake that way, whatever. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and thank you very much. You know, I started out as an alternate back in early 2010. millions of years ago and became a director in 2013. And I've had a very good time here at SCTA RCPA, which I'm very grateful for. You know, I've been fortunate enough to participate, as we were discussing earlier, in many important discussions and votes, and perhaps many that weren't quite as important, but they were all educational and helpful in moving this county forward, and I'm appreciative of that. I spent years on the Measure M successor ad hocs, and I was happy to do it because it did lead up successfully, finally, to Measure DD. There were a lot of people that didn't want that to happen. There was a lot of pushback, and yet here we are now in a very good place. And I was happy to be part of that with everybody. And most importantly, I was fortunate enough that you all selected me and allowed me to serve as your chair for a year. And I actually got to cut the ribbon for the long-awaited Highway 101 project completion. That was a big thing for Cotati, and it was a big thing for me. So I want to thank the staff, the excellent staff here. It's been said often, but it's probably not said enough how excellent they all are. In particular, I'd like to take a second to thank our executive director, Suzanne Smith, just for her patience over many, many innumerable phone calls over the years. You have been an absolute pleasure to work with, and it was really great being here with you. And for all my colleagues, you know, I think in the balance, we've really done a good job with this. I think we've been a good team, and I wish the same good fortune to everybody else going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Fischer?
Thank you. And thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure serving with you. And given that I've only been here 2 years as opposed to your 12, I'll take just a moment then. But I want to say the last 2 years has been an incredible learning experience for me. And some days I still don't think I quite get it. But it's been a pleasure to serve and with all of you. And again, thank you for the staff. It's been fabulous.
Thank you, Director. And I want to say thank you. I've enjoyed the last 2 years working with you, particularly on the Future of Transit Ad Hoc Committee, which I know is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. And it's really been nice getting to know you. And then for Director Landman, I'm going to take a minute and just say thank you to an old friend who I've known for a better part of a decade at this point, served on a couple of boards with you, and I didn't know when the most appropriate time to give good comments was, whether it was Sonoma Clean Power or SCTA RCPA, and I'm sure others have had great comments for you at things like LASCO. But certainly when I first started working with you, I knew you'd punch above your weight in terms of county leadership, and you certainly have. I think at one point you were both chairing SCTA and Sonoma Clean Power, and I'm not sure that we allow that anymore as a result. But it's always been great to sit there, oftentimes follow you down path on votes and on discussions, and I've loved every moment of working with you. So just want to say thank you and congrats on your well-deserved retirement. Are there any other comments from board members? I'll start with Director Bagby and then go to Kelly.
Well, I don't think I've gotten to serve with Mark as long as you have, Chris, but I think that we do hold maybe a record of serving at Russian River Watershed, Sonoma Clean Power, and Sonoma County Transportation Authority, all with Mark as chair at one point. And I just want to thank you, Mark, again for your leadership and your friendship, and congratulations. Just, you know, you definitely punch above your weight, and so does Cotati because of leaders like you. And Delinda, I just want to say it's been such a pleasure serving with you. I think, you know, I appreciate your just tireless leadership on climate, and I know I'm going to enjoy working with you again in the future. And so thank you so much for all that you've brought to this board, and the examples that you've set and the leadership that you provided in our communities. I just really appreciate you both. Thank you.
And Director Kelly.
Thank you. I'm just want to just briefly say how grateful I am to have had the opportunity to serve with you both. And Director Landman, you from a very early point in the moment that I joined SCTA RCPA 2 years ago, you were very quick to offer a helping hand to bring me up to speed on what had been happening historically and help me not feel like I was treading water that from day one. I was more like wading into the shallow end. So thank you. And I really appreciate that. And I'm not saying I have all the experience in the world now, just 2 years later, but I know we do have a big sea change coming about with so many folks retiring this year. And just so grateful for all the years of service that you have put in and your leadership in that. And it has also demonstrated what I should be doing now as someone who could be welcoming new folks in the future onto boards. And so thank you for demonstrating what that can look like in a positive, collaborative way. I'm truly grateful. And Director Fischer, you have been such a great leader on so many issues, including climate, and it's been wonderful getting to serve with you. And it's weird to only be serving in this capacity in a Zoom time. And I feel a sense of collaboration that we've been able to accomplish great things together, but only hoping that we would have more time to work together on things in the future. And it's my hope that my community can learn from what you've been doing in yours and to continue to kind of spread the amazing work of Cool Petaluma beyond. And so thank you for setting that standard that we can all follow. And I look forward to working with you in the future in a different capacity. Thank you.
Director Landman?
Yeah, just very quickly, Mr. Chair, thank you. I wanted to thank Director Fischer, Delinda. As soon as you came to SCTA and RCPA, you immediately brought a lot of very thoughtful and deep discussions regarding the climate issues. And it was clear to me how strongly motivated you were. And I just wanted to say, for the record, and this goes, I guess, without saying, but it should be said that you moved just about this entire county to ban new gas stations. And I know we'll always remember that. So thank you for everything. And thank you particularly for that.
All right, with that, directors, I'll go ahead and go to public comment. If you have a comment you'd like to leave, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom.
Confirming, Chair Rogers, I don't see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Oh, one just went up.
All right, let's go to Pete.
Alrighty, Pete, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
There
we are.
Thank you. I want to read a short comment that I wrote in response to our city manager's request for perspective on Delinda Fischer. It's not long. It's this. Over the course of my years swimming in the deep waters of climate science and policy, I've become aware of the big gap between the consensus view of the world science community and that of the general public. Trying to bring the consensus view to the public is like running to the front door of a house on fire and yelling, "Fire, fire," and hearing the occupants respond by saying, "It's been a long day, the kids haven't eaten yet, they're really busy, the dishwasher's overflowing, the dog just threw up on the living room floor, and thanks for telling us, but now it's just not a good time." I would say that Delinda is one of those rare people in the political realm who's willing to listen to the scientific reality and willing to bring to fruition its implications for day-to-day reality. And I hope to hold myself to that same standard. So thank you, Delinda.
All right, thank you, Pete. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members with their hands up.
All right, I'll go ahead and bring it back. Can I get a motion, please, from the board on the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
We've got a motion from Director Giudice and a second from Director Bagby. Go ahead, call the vote.
Director Bagby?
Aye.
Director Corsi?
Yes.
Director Fischer?
Yes.
Director Giudice?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Landman?
Yes.
Director Lowe?
Aye.
Director Rabbit?
Aye.
Director Reynosa?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins?
Yes.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye.
You may see that motion passing.
Great. Move on to item 4.1 then, if you would.
All right, I'm going to hand this over to James Cameron, Mr. Chair, who will introduce the item and our presenters.
Thank you. I'm going to share with you a slide deck that's going to be presented by the Resilient State Route 37 project leadership team members. And I'll introduce those members as we go through the presentation. It's a fairly robust and long presentation. It's between 25 and 30 minutes, and will give all of the directors the best summary of where we're at on the Resilient 37 program. This multi-billion-dollar Resilient 37 program includes addressing both the built and natural environments in the San Pablo Baylands. The challenges with sea level rise and flooding caused by climate change require creative solutions to protect the sensitive ecology and provide equitable transportation solutions. Our Resilient 37 motto is one corridor, one team, many solutions. Key members of our team will be presenting 5 topics to the SCTA board today. I'll start with a brief overview, and then Tammy Massengale from Caltrans headquarters will present on the State Route 37 Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, also referred to as the PEL. Ahmed Rahid from Caltrans District 4 will present on the flood reduction project from US 101 to Atherton Avenue, followed by Kevin Chen from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, who will present on the Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project. I'll close it out with the MOU, adding SMART to the 6 logos that are surrounding me now, and adding them to our one team, delivering these many solutions along this corridor. All of these elements are part of all of these elements that are going to be presented to the SCTA board today complement each other to deliver the program. Starting with that overview, the highway is in the northern reaches of the San Francisco Bay called the San Pablo Baylands. This slide represents how the corridor is split up and has been split up for decades based on transportation infrastructure. The bottleneck and congested 2-lane highway between Sears Point and Mare Island is in the middle, with 4-lane sections of highway on each side, linking to US 101 and Interstate 80. These transportation splits closely mirror the ecological planning and environmental enhancement project sections that follow operational landscape units between 101 and Atherton, as well as between Atherton and Sears Point, and between Sears Point and Vallejo that compose the segments of operational landscape units for ecological planning. The highway acts as an emergency evacuation route in addition to carrying daily commuters. There are 2 alternative routes to State Route 37 that are both congested and are more than double the corridor travel distance of 21 miles. Shown by the green line in the upper right of your screen, you'll see the 21-mile long corridor. To the north, you can travel Highway 101 to 116 to 121 to 12 to Highway 29 and travel over 40 miles as an alternative route. To the south, you'll see the blue line where you can travel down Highway 101 to Interstate 80 and then on to Interstate 580 to Interstate 80, which is also over 40 miles. That's across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, and it's important to note that the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge was retrofit to a non-collapse standard, which means that in the event of an earthquake, it is designed to save lives, but it is not guaranteed how long it will be closed for or how long it will take to open after an earthquake or seismic event. This slide captures the phased approach of delivering the Resilient State Route 37 program. This phased approach aligns with our 2018 corridor plan that went through extensive public engagement. Starting from the bottom with the blue line representing bay waters rising, that is why we're here. Next, moving up is the long-term project. That is a project that we are all in alignment and agreement on. The Planning and Environmental Linkages Study coming up in this presentation will go into the details of how we can achieve long-term resilience, starting with the section between US 101 and Atherton. that has gone underwater in 2017 as well as 2019. The top bar represents the interim project. That's a project between Sears Point and Mare Island. This project is scheduled to open carpool lanes by 2027 and address equity, linking the most affordable housing in the Bay Area with jobs in the West. The project incentivizes carpooling and makes transit viable. It also includes the purchase of electric shuttles to run transit between Solano and Marin. The Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project will advance landscape scale restoration of the Baylands with improvements to the strip marsh east and building a longer Tole Creek Bridge to allow for unimpeded ecological processes of both water and wildlife. This project will accelerate the long-term project by providing early benefits. And with the proposed toll acting as a VMT or vehicle miles traveled mitigation measure, the project would reduce GHG and align with the state's Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure known as CAPTI. With that summary, I'll pass it now to Tammy Massengill from Caltrans headquarters to go over the Planning and Environmental Linkages study.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, directors. My name is Tammy Massengill. I'm with Caltrans headquarters and have been one of the co-leads for the State Route 37 Planning and Environmental Linkages study. The Planning and Environmental Leakages Study is a Federal Highway Administration initiative to bridge the gap that often occurs between planning and the environmental review process. Caltrans also incorporated CEQA agencies into the Pell process. I wanted to let you know that Caltrans, in coordination with MTC and the 4 North Bay County Transportation Authorities, are completing the first Pell on the state highway system in California. The Pell study considered the entire corridor with connections at US 101 in the west and Interstate 80 in the east. Moreover, we were asked by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, to consider a Pell for the corridor. And as James mentioned, State Route 37 is a 21-mile vital link in the region's economy. It connects the 4 North Bay counties. It is heavily traveled and prone to congestion. It goes through highly sensitive marshlands, commonly referred to as the San Pablo Baylands. Given its location, it is vulnerable to flood-related closures and sea level rise. Studies predict the corridor could be permanently submerged as sea levels rise. This could result in additional traffic on distant roadways that are not equipped for it. Caltrans has undertaken the Pell study to address future transportation issues on State Route 37 and identify a long-term solution for the challenges facing this corridor. Caltrans opted to conduct the Pell study for many reasons. Pell allows for the examination of a broad area. As you'll see in a moment, options well beyond the current State Route 37 were considered. Pell sets the stage for focused future projects. It establishes a long-term transportation vision that is built on the input of key stakeholders, considers conceptual design, traffic analysis, and evaluation of environmental impacts. It solicits input from the public, elected officials, agencies, and tribes, establishes buy-in on vision, purpose and need, alternatives, and environmental issues, and lastly, enables more effective decision-making. Next slide, please. One of the primary reasons Caltrans is conducting the Pell study is to address sea level rise and look for solutions to projected inundation. The various alignments and alternatives we have evaluated for future improvements to the corridor all considered sea level rise. For context, we are showing 2 aerial photos of State Route 37. The photo on the left shows existing conditions today, while the photo on the right shows what 9 feet of sea level rise inundation is projected to look like in 21-23. The dark blue you see ranges from 8 to 12 feet of water. The medium blue ranges from 6 to 8 feet of water, and the light blue ranges from 4 to 6 feet of water. These photos are from the BCDC's Flood Explorer tool. Next slide, please. Earlier, I mentioned that a Pell offers a chance to look at a broad area. As you can see on the slide, in the course of the Pell study, we looked at many different alignment alternatives to the existing State Route 37, ranging from new bay crossings in the south to new roadways north of the existing corridor to an expansion of State Route 116 and State Route 12 through Sonoma and Napa counties. Caltrans adapted these alignments from prior studies conducted for other projects in the corridor. some prepared by Caltrans, MTC, and the other transportation authorities. In addition, 3 of the alignments were added from feedback received from the stakeholders, specifically 8, 9, and 10. In the next few slides, I'll say more about how the Pell study evaluated these prospective corridors. Next slide, please. The Pell process we followed was built around 3 levels of screening. As you can see in the graphic, the screening process helped us start with a large number of alignments and allowed for a single alternative to emerge as the preferred. The funnels in the pictures are symbolic of the evaluation criteria developed at each level. In the first level, on the far left, we looked at how well the alignments met the project purpose and need. In the second and third levels, the alternatives were evaluated against detailed criteria related to design, environmental factors, traffic, and feasibility. Very important to note that this entire process illustrated above was deeply informed or driven by stakeholder participation. Stakeholders helped us from the very beginning, from shaping the purpose and need to conducting each level of evaluation. As shown in the graphic, the goal is to carry forward the best performing alternatives and set aside those that are problematic so that the environmental review, which is required by federal and state regulations, can be more efficient and clearer. Without a Pell, the sorting and screening of alternatives can become subsumed in the environmental review process, which can really drag the process out. As I mentioned earlier, a key aspect of a Pell is to integrate transportation planning and environmental consideration towards a more efficient environmental review process. And by environmental review, I'm referring to the state and federal laws, CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality Act, and NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. CEQA and NEPA in turn require us to prepare studies stating what the environmental effects will be. Next slide, please. Because of the time constraints, I'm going to give a very abbreviated overview of the 3 levels of screening. On the slide, you can see the 5-pointed purpose and need statement that was developed with stakeholders at the outset of the study. This statement grounded our process in thinking about issues related not only to transportation, but to the environment and equity. In our level 2 and level 3 screenings, we used more specific criteria such as potential impacts to sensitive lands and species, the amount of vehicle miles traveled that would be generated, a wide variety of other topics that you might see in an environmental document like noise, visual effects, cultural resources, and more. We also used criteria related to feasibility of construction and cost. Next slide, please. As a result of the 3 levels of screening, the alternative that emerged on top was constructing a causeway generally along the existing State Route 37 corridor. Some key attributes of this alternative, which we called Alternative 5 in our study, include it would be an expressway design, 2 travel lanes in each direction with a shoulder running lane for peak period use. The posted speed limit would be 60 miles per hour. There would be accommodations for bikes and pedestrians. It would primarily be a causeway with limited embankment. It would also allow for the removal of existing State Route 37 fill in those sections where there's a causeway. There would be access through interchanges, intersections, and some limited direct access. And one of the most important points is it allows the opportunity for rail to be adjacent to it. Alternative 5 emerged as a preferred alternative for a number of reasons, including it utilized the existing transportation corridor, minimizing land conversion, balances potential impacts to upland resources and aquatic resources along the existing corridor. It best preserves regional travel patterns, including for those equity priority communities. There's no induced VMT. There would be minimal use of agricultural land. It allows for landward marsh migration. It has the least need for noise impact, least adverse change to visual quality, and only moderate impacts to tidal marsh. Next slide, please. Here's a more refined depiction of the preferred alternative. You can see on the screen that the preferred alternative would primarily be a causeway, which is shown in blue, with a few limited sections at grade or on embankment, which are shown in green. What's going to happen next is that our Pell study report will package up everything we learned that emerged from the Pell process that will include environmental constraints, including very specific design feedback that we received from our working groups and how best to design this roadway. And I'm very happy to say that that report should be out next week. So we'll have that out to everybody. Next slide, please. The report will also make some recommendations on how best to go forward constructing the long-term projects. A corridor of this length would be a very costly proposition, as you all well know. Rough estimates are between $8 and $24 billion. We have been looking at ways and coordinating with our resource agencies and transportation authority partners on how the corridor might be logically broken up into more feasible pieces. It is important to note that each of these sections can be combined with other sections if there is available funding. I'll turn it back to Ahmed to talk about the US 101 to Atherton Avenue flood reduction project, the first project that has evolved out of the Pell study. Ahmed?
Thank you, Tammy. Good afternoon, directors. My name is Ahmed Rahid. I'm the acting regional project manager for the 37 corridor from Caltrans. And today I'm going to present the US 37 flood reduction project, the current status of it and the schedule. Next slide, please. The project is located in Marin County. It starts at US 101-37 intersection and goes all the way to Atherton Avenue and 37 intersection to the east. Within the project limit, 37 corridor is a 4-lane expressway. This part of 37 is really vulnerable to flooding. You probably remember that we had to shut down 37 twice within the past 5 years. First time, it was in 2017, we had to shut it down for 28 days. And the next time it was in 2019, we had to shut it down for 8 days for flooding. And also per some of the latest modeling done by BCDC and UC Davis, so this section of the road will be inundated within the year 2050. This project will address the recurring flooding and also the projected sea level rise to year 2130. Next slide, please. In this slide, the color coded lines shows the existing elevation within our project limit and also the surrounding levees. Just to clarify the orientation, the project starts at US 101-37 intersection. At location 1, we have the Novato Creek Bridge, which we are going to replace. And the project will terminate at location 2, the Atherton Avenue undercrossing. The red line in this picture depicts the existing elevation, range of elevation from 4 to 6 feet. The yellow line, the existing elevation is 10 to 12 feet. And the green line, it's 18 to 20 feet and above. Just to compare, the current FEMA 100-year base flood elevation is 11 feet within our project limit. As you can see, the majority of our project limit from 1 to 2 is below that 11 feet. Next slide, please. Just to give you a background, we started the environmental process in the summer of 2021. We did our first scoping meeting in November of last year. Back then, our proposed alternative was to do an embankment for the whole stretch to an interim elevation. And that alternative was not well received by the public and the agencies alike. So we listened to them, we listened to our partners, we went back to the drawing table, we came up with different alternatives. And at the same time, the Pell study actually recommended to utilize the existing transportation corridor for all long-term improvements. To align with that recommendation and also to throw away any future costs. So the PDT decided to do the causeway for the entire stretch from US 101 to Atherton. That's our preferred alternative. But unfortunately, we don't have the fund to do the causeway for the entire stretch. So right now, the Novato Creek Bridge replacement will be the first fundable construction package out the door. Next slide, please. This slide shows our current schedule. We began the environmental process in the summer of 2021. And we did our first scoping meeting in November 17 of last year. And we have our second scoping meeting scheduled in 2 days on December 14th. We are targeting to circulate the draft environmental document in the spring of next year and complete the environmental process in fall of next year, and with a target of completing the design in 2026 and begin construction in 2027. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin Chen.
Great, thanks, Ahmed. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Chen. I'm a staff with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So you just heard from Tammy and Ahmed on the long-term improvements on this corridor. The next part of the presentation is focused on a near-term project between the Sears Point and Mare Island, which is also known as the interim project. Next, please. So the purpose of this project is to address the severe traffic congestion on State Route 37, where the highway necks down from 2 lanes to 1 lane in each direction, as shown in blue on the map in this middle stretch of the corridor. It's about 10 miles in length. This congestion problem is a significant equity concern as it serves equity priority communities in Vallejo that commute this corridor for jobs over in Marin and Sonoma counties. There's no viable and convenient alternate routes, as James said earlier. Also, there's no existing transit service along this corridor, which really limits the travel options for the commuters. So with this project, we're looking to improve traffic flow, reduce peak travel times, and more importantly, to increase vehicle occupancy by incentivizing the use of carpooling and bus transit. Next, please. Here's a range of alternatives that's been evaluated as part of the environmental review process. Alternative 1 is a 3-lane facility with HOV lanes. The 3-lane is enabled by movable median barriers. So the median barriers gets transferred at least twice a day in order to provide 2 lanes for the peak direction of travel. The alternative 2 is a part-time use HOV lane where the shoulder gets opened up to an HOV lane during the peak periods and remain as a shoulder during the off-peak period. An example would be the Richmond San Rafael Bridge lower deck, the 3rd lane that's been in operation in the recent years. Alternative 3 is a 4-lane highway with HOV lanes. Actually, on alternative 3, we've looked at 2 variations with a 4-foot shoulder as well as an 8-foot shoulder, and also looking at HOV lanes as well. So as you can see, one of the common features across all alternatives is an HOV lane. That would really help enable carpooling as well as bus transit on this corridor. This project also proposes to implement tolling subject to separate approvals. There are also elements of this project that would bolster up the existing highway against near-term flooding risk as well. And as part of the environmental review process, many considerations are taken into account. That includes the actual environmental impacts, safety evaluations, bike access, emergency access, operations and maintenance of the facility, as well as the ability of the project to address traffic congestion relief in order to meet the purpose and need of the project. Next, please. So with this project, we would be reducing traffic congestion pretty significantly on this corridor. As shown here, during the afternoon commute, for example, the peak travel times would be reduced from 100 minutes down to 26 minutes or so with the project. So there's an economic benefit to the delay times saved by all the commuters as well as all the trucks on this corridor. So when you add up all those times saved by all the users on a daily basis over the course of 5 years, those economic benefits would equate to upwards of $500 million, close to $600 million in user benefits. And if you look at the project cost, we're looking at about $430 million. The user benefits would actually exceed the cost to construct this project. Next, please. And as part of the project, we are looking to implement bus transit on Highway 37. Our partner over at the Solano Transportation Authority have been working closely with the transit operators to start the planning process for that in terms of implementing a transit service on this corridor. That coordination is required to look in terms of coordinating with the transit operators on the Marin side and also on the Solano side to make sure that we have good connections with existing transit service. More importantly on that is over on the Marin side, being able to connect with the smart commuter rail in Novato. Next, please. This project also includes public access improvements. At this stage of the project development, we are looking at potential opportunities that are well supported by the public. And one of those is the Sears Point Bay Trail Gap Closure Project. As you can see on the map to the right-hand side, currently there's a 1 mile gap shown in the dash lines in the existing trail system just east of the Highway 37 and 121 intersection. By closing that 1 mile gap, we can really actually provide 8 miles of continuous trail in this area. And this is one of those projects that's been well supported by the public. There are also a number of public access opportunities that's been identified on the Vallejo side of the corridor. Next, please. We have also been working very closely with the resource agencies and have identified 2 key opportunities for us to incorporate as part of the project as we move forward in order to improve near-term ecological improvements, as well as providing a phased adaptation strategy on this corridor. The first on the left-hand side is called the Strip Marsh East. And there's an opportunity for us to enhance the strip marsh in this area in order to provide the sensitive marsh habitat that is rapidly degrading due to drainage problems that exist today. This is a nature-based solution which maintains shoreline erosion buffer, as well as attenuates wave energy for the existing Highway 37. The second component is shown on the right-hand side is the Tole Creek Bridge. The existing Tole Creek Bridge is really narrow and is a severe constraint on tidal flow. So by replacing and providing a newer and new and longer bridge here, it's really critical to help support the Sonoma Creek Baylands strategy restoration that's planned on the north side of the highway. So we are going to continue to work closely with the resource agencies in advancing these improvements forward. Next, please. So in summary, with the interim project, we are addressing several key issues on this corridor. The first is equity. This corridor connects more affordable homes over on the Vallejo side, which connects to jobs over in Marin and Sonoma counties. This is a significant equity concern as it exists today because commuters really have no choice but to get stuck in traffic for up to 100 minutes to get home in the afternoon on this 21-mile corridor. There are currently no transit service available, and there's no incentives to carpooling. So with the HOV lane that's going to be provided as part of the project, we are making transit viable as well as making carpooling viable. We are being very mindful about equity concerns, so we're looking at implementing means-based tolling as well as transit fares. So we'll be taking those into account to address equity concerns on this corridor. This project also delivers sustainability. As just mentioned, we'll be working with the resource agencies to improve the Strip Marsh East, as well as replacing the Tole Creek Bridge, as these improvements would basically buy us more time towards delivering the long-term improvement project. Tolling is a critical component of the project, which would generate necessary funding towards delivering this project, as well as serving as matching funds for the as we compete for other state and federal grants for the long-term improvements. Implementation of tolling is also important for us to help in order for us to manage congestion on this corridor and reduce vehicle miles of travel, as James mentioned earlier in the introduction. Next, please. So with the complexity of the environmental setting on this corridor and that we are trying to address both near-term and long-term needs, it is very critical for us to establish a close working partnership with the resource agencies in order to enable us to deliver the time-sensitive transportation and ecological benefits. And we are really committed to working with all of our partners to minimize project impacts and advancing ecological restoration ahead of sea level rise. We're committed to keep this critical transportation corridor operational and delivering equitable transportation on this corridor and to facilitate restoration of the Baylands. And of course, we are definitely committed to continue to work with our partners and coordinate with them on a regular basis as we move forward. Next, please. So here's a snapshot of our project schedule. We've completed the draft environmental document early this year. We've got a lot of public comments, and since then, we've been very busy addressing public comments and working on the final environmental document. The current plan is to wrap up the environmental review process fairly soon, subject to final approval from Caltrans. We have been working with project partners and have secured some design funds so that entering into next year, we will start the design phase, which will go through 2025. And hopefully we can secure construction funding and we can start construction in 2025. And the goal is to finish this project by 2027 or so. We also, I guess, with the close collaborations with the partnering agencies and the resource agencies, also looking at innovative delivery strategies, we are really looking for other ways to expedite the delivery of this project. That concludes my presentation. I'll hand it back to James.
Thanks, Kevin. Wrapping up the 5 topics here. Our Resilient State Route 37 Policy Committee is composed of elected officials from the 4 North Bay counties and has been meeting since November of 2014. In June of 2018, when the corridor plan was completed, there was a need to formalize the executive staff and project leadership team at the 4 North Bay County Transportation Authorities, as well as MTC and Caltrans, to deliver the corridor plan. The 6-party MOU was executed in early 2019. In delivering the Resilient State Route 37 program, it became apparent SMART was a critical partner that needed to be part of the leadership team that supports the policy committee. Also, the tolling strategy continues to be led by MTC staff, but those staff will now be representing a governing body known as BAFA, the Bay Area Infrastructure Finance Authority. The revised MOU is proposed as a 7-party agreement to include SMART. To conclude with staff recommendations, staff recommends that the SCTA authorize the executive director to sign the State Route 37 Planning and Environmental Linkages Letter of Support, and staff recommends that the SCTA authorize the chair to sign the Amendment 1 to the Resilient State Route 37 Program Memorandum of Understanding, adding SMART to the MOU in substantial conformance to be attached pending final legal review. With that, I'd like to point out 2 resources for the Resilient 37 corridor. One is resilient37.org. The other is State Route 37 corridor projects. SCTA staff maintains the resilient37.org website, and Caltrans staff maintain the State Route 37 corridor projects. You can get much more information and all the history at these websites. And with that, I'll pass it back to the chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, James. I see his hand is up, but I was going to kick it over to Director Rabbit, who's been intimately involved in some of these discussions. So, Director.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. I have been chair of the Highway 37 committee since its inception back in November of 14, and really proud of the work that we've done to date, really initiated by the 4 counties that were affected. And at that time, Caltrans was not quite the partner they are today in terms of when they could get around to looking at this corridor. And I wanted to point out a couple things. One thing I think Kevin, and it's great to see Kevin here and Tammy, and for everyone else's sake, Tammy will be retiring after this project. So this is the swan song, and we appreciate very much her work in leading on the Pell side of things. But Kevin mentioned the congestion, but I think we all need to put that in perspective, because what you're talking about is a 21-mile corridor that can take up to 100 minutes for people to get home in the afternoon. And if you do the math, that's a slow, agonizing commute that is very problematic. It goes to the equity issues. It goes to all the things that we're trying to solve. And it's primarily because of the congestion or the constriction down to the 2 lanes on the 10-mile section over across what we always consider more of the wetland side of things. Although ironically, it's the other side that floods that needs to be addressed. And there are 7 different projects, shorter term projects that are ongoing, that are all very valuable as well. And I just want to say, there is huge value in the interim moving forward, certainly for those people that are stuck in that agonizing commute each and every day, while the Pell phases of the ultimate project are moving forward. Could also say that, this is a huge, complicated, expensive job. It's also not the only one in the Bay Area. And that's also problematic. You got Valley Link, you got the DTX, which is the Caltrain into the Salesforce station, or eventually the high-speed rail, and then BART to San Jose, among others. I'm sure there's a few more that we could add into that mix. So we're competing for a lot of the same dollars. And while for us, it's a lot of cars on Highway 37, it's 45,000 vehicles, which pales in comparison to some of those other more popular populous areas. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. But the interim project is not a throwaway project. It alleviates some of that initial angst of the congestion, the travel times. It addresses some of the equity issues that are ongoing. It supports the option for transit, and it supports, most importantly, the environmental enhancements, which I think make this project so unique. One that will not have to mitigate after the fact, but enhance during and because of the design of the corridor going forward. Elevating the entire corridor, the majority of the corridor, the vast majority of the corridor on a causeway will allow water to push back and forth, enhance wetlands, instead of it being a dike as it is now. So I look very much forward to that. In the interim, on the interim project, we do get to expand or lengthen Tole Creek Bridge. And if you look at that aerial view that was shown, you can see how it constricts the amount of water that can flow upstream. And I can tell you that Sonoma Land Trust has acquired a lot of land from there going north, that they would like the Tole Creek Bridge lengthened, really, to allow the volume of water needed to enhance that wetland. And then that strip marsh east unit that you see, that was really a failed mitigation of a previous project. It has never really taken off as a restored wetland, and it needs attention. And it's an opportunity, and it's one that can take place right now with the interim project moving forward. And I think we also know, in spite of the fact that we're always told, and we hope that this is true, that there is more money now than ever in Washington, D.C. because of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the amount of projects around, the deferred maintenance, the cost of the projects, it is difficult to ever get your hands on billions and billions and billions of dollars all at once to skip a interim project and go immediately to the ultimate project. One only has to look at our own situation here in Marin and Sonoma County, 1.3 billion over 20 years to complete the 101 corridor. We can do better. We should do better. It's a bigger project and more, there's more money out there, but it still has to be phased in some way in order to make it feasible going forward. So just want to thank all the staff and the support ongoing, Suzanne and James, and like I mentioned, all our Caltrans and MTC partners for really moving this project forward to a point where we're on the precipice of something really wonderful happening. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Rabbit. Do we have any questions from the rest of the board? Start with Director Reynosa, followed by Director Hopkins.
Hi, everybody. I have a question. Have we looked at bay travel? So this is kind of my first overview at this whole project. In my mind, I'm like, what if we get it wrong? What if we get the flooding levels wrong and it's higher than, I'm just wondering if one of the possibilities was to travel by the bay. Whatever that is, I don't know, but I'm just wanted to ask that question.
I think that's for you, James.
Okay, I can respond through the chair. Thank you. Yes, so the Solano Transportation Authority did do a ferry study to look at ferry service connecting Vallejo to locations in Marin. The study itself, we can get more information to you, but there was the initial projections for ridership did not make the benefit cost work out, was the high level summary of that. But I can, Kevin, you turned your camera on. Do you have some you'd like to? No, okay. So I'd be happy to provide that study to you. Suzanne, do you have anything?
I would just add that one of the challenges in the corridor, and one of the reasons bus service may be a good option, is the dispersed nature of the travelers, as opposed to there being like one or two hubs on the west end that people from the east end are commuting to. It's a little more fluid than that. And so having options, I think, is one of the keys, especially having a transit option that works for that sort of varied need. And whether that ends up being smaller buses or just traditional fixed route, I mean, I think those are the things we're doing some analysis on right now.
Chair, if I may, that actually brings up a second question. So with that, have we looked at who the commuters are? Who are these commuters? What kind of industry are they working in? And just if I could throw in real fast, you know, my background is in human resources in the vineyards. And so the last 7 years, little by little, I've seen addresses shift to American Canyon, to Fairfield, to come all the way to Sonoma or Napa to work. So, you know, we talk about equity. So just looking at who those commuters are, and I think it is an important step. So are you looking at that, finding data for that information?
Yeah, I'd like to pass that one to Tammy or Kevin if they have that information.
Hi, yeah, this is Kevin. So maybe I can chime in a little bit. I don't remember all the information on top of my head, but both the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, as well as I think both the STA as well, had looked at the origin and destination data that's available on this corridor using big data, such as cell phone users and other things. And that kind of went into the transit feasibility study that was done previously by the NVTA a couple of years ago, and right now the Sonoma Transportation Authority is also doing additional studies on it. So I think that information is actually available on the SCTA website, I think, with the NVTA OD study. And I guess I'll just mention that, you know, Suzanne's right, you know, the OD, the origin destinations are pretty spread out, if you will. And I think that's why it kind of makes sense to look at, you know, to starting transit service as a bus transit or even micro transit to kind of build up the demand on transit on this corridor. And you know, in terms of, you know, trying to get people to form carpool or to take transit, you know, we don't like, I mean, it would be great if we can get everybody to do that, but then if we can start with just getting 5 or 10% of the travelers shifting from their current driving habit into carpooling and transit, that makes a huge difference to congestion relief. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Any other questions from Rosa? All right, let's go to Director Hopkins, followed by Director Landman.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the presentation. I was curious, there were a lot of references to equity, and what grassroots organizations or community-based organizations have been engaged in this process. And do we have any sort of specific objectives or metrics surrounding equity that have been developed as part of the process?
So to date, the means-based tolling and transit equity programs have been based primarily off of financial information. The PEL does identify the equity priority communities that it services as well. As far as the outreach to equity communities, we did do language, we did, outreach in 3 different language, both Tagalog, Spanish, and English. Tammy, do you have anything else that you can add to the equity component that was part of the PEL study?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the names of all the organizations that we reached out to, but we actually had hired a consultant that focused on those community-based organizations. We did work extensively with the 3 tribes that are in the North Bay area, and they were involved not only in our public outreach, but they were part of our stakeholder working groups and also part of our technical working groups. So the tribes were really involved, and they do have some folks that live over in the Vallejo area that do commute over to the Sonoma side that they're very concerned about. So that's all I can tell you right now. I just don't have them handy. I could look them up if you wanted to know which ones specifically we reached out to.
If I could also add, Vice Chair Hopkins, Solano County has done a pretty significant, so given the commute shed is primarily Solano County residents commuting west, they've done a pretty significant amount of outreach, just sort of, I don't want to say independent, but like in partnership with this. And I know that Supervisor Hannigan and the Mayor of Vallejo in particular have been advocates on the policy committee around ensuring the voices of, it's challenging, right? Because in a corridor where you want input from commuters and you have meetings during the day, that's not always going to work for them. So Solano Transportation Authority has done some of that work to ensure outreach to the folks who are the users during the commute hours.
Thank you. And then follow up, there was a mention of a means-based discount for tolls and transit. I have heard feedback that the system currently is fairly difficult to navigate and not really that accessible to folks who are of low income. And so I'm just kind of curious, is there a proposal? Are we sort of looking at just utilizing the existing system? Or is there sort of a way of potentially making that process more accessible for folks of limited means to be able to access discounted programs?
Yeah,
So that yeah, Kevin, please. You.
Yeah. So I guess as part of the previous legislation that was introduced for tolling on 37, there's a lot of discussion that went into the development of that bill in terms of the equity discount program that could be in place. Unfortunately, that was SB 1050 that didn't go through, but the intent is for us to continue to pursue a means-based discount program as we move forward. The actual implementation of tolling is not going to happen until the project is complete and open. So we are still talking about a few years down the road. So in the next several years, we'll definitely continue to, I guess, define this program and do a lot of outreach to make sure that that people have access to this information and can really have it be an effective and widely used program that that people can be aware of and they could use of it. James, you want to add something to it?
Oh, that covers it, and that's where it's in its infancy. So the answer to the question is to be determined. The comments well received to make it more accessible.
Thank you. And one last question, which I don't know if this is sort of for Suzanne or for our attorney, but just kind of wanted to get some clarity on the MOU and kind of what our legal obligations are for that. I did read through the document. There was this discussion of sort of mutual responsibilities, and I'm just kind of would like some clarity on really how we are obligated to sort of assist in delivering this project.
Sure. It is an MOU, so it does not have legal authority. Corey is available if you'd like to hear from her. She's Drew, if you want to elevate her as a participant. But it does serve as sort of guidance documents for all of the many partners who are involved in this. So we have some guidelines to help through, develop the work. If the question is maybe related to how this project gets funded and what responsibility may lie with us as the SCTA, I think the MOU does not speak to funding requirements. I will say our SCTA staff does spend a good amount of time on this, so there is that component. It is really in keeping with our agreement that we have with MTC, who funds a lot of our staff to do this sort of a project. So it's that sort of a balance. But I see Corey is here as well, so she can speak to that, I think, not to the staffing part, but to the legal responsibility part.
And Corey, just sort of specifically, you know, was kind of the issue as it was framed in the staff report was, shall the SCTA authorize the chair to sign the MOU establishing the mutual responsibilities in delivering the Resilient State Route 37 program? And so that sort of language itself felt very strong. So any clarification on that would be helpful.
Happy to. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all. Adam Brand from our office who worked on the MOU with SCTA staff, and I could follow up with him to get some specifics. But as Suzanne pointed out, it's an agreement to work together more than anything else and to coordinate efforts in this regard. So I feel comfortable with the way that staff has phrased it, but I can definitely see if I can ping Adam and get any more detail on that particular language in the action if you need it.
That'd be great if it's possible, but back to the chair to go to other folks while we're waiting. Thanks.
Yeah, while we wait for that, I'll go to Director Landman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a question that could go either to Mr. Chen or Mr. Cameron. I'll let them decide who'd like to speak to it. I had two questions, actually. The first was just confirmation that toll was actually going to be part of this first interim project, because that wasn't an expectation I had, but it sounds like that's been pretty clearly defined, so I don't think I need to have that clarified. But what I would like to know is there were some very large expectations of benefit from the HOV lane to reduce travel time. And I wonder if you could just speak to the assumptions behind that really large, at least it seemed to me, hours of reduction in travel time. Based on just my experience living in Sonoma County for 35 years, I see our HOV lanes often lightly used, very empty at times, and the other lanes more deeply crowded. So I'd like to know how that actually could work.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So again, Kevin Chen with MTC. Yes, you're right. So in terms of tolling, that is proposed as part of the project, but it is subject to a separate and subsequent approval as well on the tolling before we can actually start tolling on this corridor or within the project limits. So that is part of the project. And in terms of the anticipated traffic congestion relief benefits from the project, so as part of the environmental review process, a very detailed traffic analysis was conducted. So basically, travel data was gathered in terms of traffic counts, travel times on this corridor, and a simulation model was set up, if you will, that kind of replicates the existing conditions. And then the project team basically evaluated what it would look like with the additional traffic lane. So again, it's from a traffic modeling work that went into as part of the environmental review process. And if you look at it, the current middle stretch of the corridor is only got one lane in each direction, and that's really the root cause of the bottleneck and all the queues that got stuck before they can get to get through the bottleneck. So by having this additional lane, even though it's just an HOV lane, it really helps provide, it provides the additional capacity, but more importantly, with the additional lane, we would expect to have more HOVs on this corridor. So we would expect to see somewhere between 20 and 25% of eligible HOV users that would be using this corridor. So if you shift that 20-25% traffic out of the other lane, it can really help reduce that congestion that's out there.
But where did we get that assumption of a 25% increase in people willing to, or able rather, I should say, because most people I think are generally willing if they can find a way to make it work. Where did we get that number from? And that has to be an assumption or an estimation. We didn't talk to people. We don't have a list of people who have said, oh, we'll do it happily if there's an HOV lane and we can get a slight reduction in cost. Now we'll jump to traveling in a carpool, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so as part of the existing data collection I mentioned earlier, we've also collected vehicle occupancy data. So there is some carpool formation that's on the corridor already. It varies between 15 and 20%, depending on the time of day. So we have some carpooling to begin with on this corridor. With the project, we've done an extensive modeling exercise based on socioeconomic data. So that's based on, household incomes, where do they live and where do they travel for jobs, and a lot of the other information in terms of, their route choices and how do they get from point A to point B, whether they drive alone, take transit or take carpool. And so in that model, with the HOV lane that's proposed as part of the project, that makes carpooling more convenient and also saves additional time. The additional time saved would actually translate to higher incentive for people to switch from driving alone to carpool, if you will. So we're looking at additional, roughly 5%. It could be more or less depending on time of day of people that are willing to shift into carpooling. So that comprised of the 20 to 25% that I mentioned earlier is comprised of the existing carpooling as well as the additional carpooling that can be generated as part of the project. Again, so with the additional lane and the fact that we are shifting more people into carpooling, that combined effect really helps achieve the congestion relief that's been projected.
I have to think that at least at minimum, this is a much more of a guesstimate than a reasonable expectation. My initial reaction is that I'm not 100% sure it's helpful to add a toll, which does increase economic pressure. As we put it, to reduce vehicle miles traveled was the goal of this. Yet these are people that have no choices, was also said, to use this route. It doesn't seem helpful to me to add that toll and economic pressure. And then secondly, to also limit those who can't find a workable carpool for whatever reasons they may have, to increase levels of gridlock, potentially, now that we might hopefully have some additional room, which I support 100%. I think that's absolutely great. Especially if these are drivers that have been designated as in need of an equitable solution. I'm not sure if we're really making things better, or if we are, that we're not making them as good as we could be, given the infrastructural windup. But that's just my personal take. I'm happy to support the Pell letter of support today, and as well as the MOU. But as far as this interim project and the tolling aspect and HOV aspect, just for me personally, I'm not convinced that will be as beneficial or is the best use of this. But I appreciate the time, and I do appreciate the explanation. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll go to Director Corsi.
Thanks. Couple questions. One, on the bus route, I couldn't tell by the map, but it looked like the western terminus, or maybe the beginning of the western route. Is it the North Marin or North Novato station, the Atherton station of SMART? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll just mention that the transit implementation plan is still early in the planning process. So in terms of where it actually ends on the western side, certainly somewhere in Novato is an option. But I think the discussion between the STA as well as the transit operators on the Marin side, as well as the Transportation Authority of Marin, also looking at potential connecting into San Rafael. So again, I guess the agencies are still coordinating on this planning effort. The intent is to have a transit plan that we can implement when the project is open. Again, we're looking at 2027 now, so there's a few more years to really work out the details of this plan. And I'm glad that you asked this question. I guess kind of coming back to the earlier question about in terms of the viability of carpooling on this corridor. So this HOV lane is important for carpooling, but it's also viable for transit. Without a dedicated lane for the carpools and the transit, it just makes it a lot more difficult to implement transit service on this corridor. So I just want to mention that as well.
Sure. Also, Suzanne, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add linking back to Director Landman's comment about tolling. It is at best challenging to operate new transit service if we don't have a new revenue source for operations. So the toll revenue will be used to run that transit service. That is what the plan's looking at this point. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion as well.
Okay. The other question that I have is, I believe that SMART at one point submitted a proposed sharing of the right of way, obviously not in the near term, but in the long term. And I'm wondering if that is being considered in any of this.
So SMART is been brought in as part of the team. They've released a white paper that shows the some visionary aspirational alignments for their system. The detailed planning of that is yet to occur. So there's nothing in the PEL that precludes it from being in a parallel alignment, and that's what the PEL proposes. Tammy, if you're still there, if you could go into a little more detail about how the PEL addresses those alternative modes, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, James, and thank you for the question. We had a lot of different alternative modes of transportation that we looked at. Rail was a big one, and part of that is because on the western portion, they're adjacent to the state highway system, and they if they're not able to raise their tracks, then us raising the state highway isn't going to help that flow, and they will be subject to sea level rise. So we worked very closely with SMART throughout the process, and they did put out the white paper like James said. Some of the other modes of transportation that we looked at was also it's called an auto train. And we dismissed that from further consideration because there wasn't a train there wasn't a corridor that went from Vallejo to Novato. We also looked, other modes of transportation were, let's see, the ferries, which we've talked about the ferries. I did want to add, in addition to the ferries, about the disparate population we would be serving and where they're each going, is there was a lot of concern from the environmental resource agencies on the amount of dredging that would have to take place in order to have that type of a ferry service. And I think those are the big ones that we looked at. James, was there another one you wanted me to focus on? Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Corsi. Are there any other hands on this item? Let's see, did we get a response for Director Hopkins?
Mr. Chair, I see Adam Brand is here from County Council's office, and also just wanted to point out in the chat that Tammy posted the organizations that were engaged in the PEL study.
And Suzanne, if I can just add to that, those are just some of them. There was enough room in the chat to put all of them in there. There were more, but I thought that gave you a good flavor of what we, the type of CBOs that we looked at.
Perfect. And is there a way for us to make that available to the public? I think that only goes to the host and panelists.
Yes, we will do that.
Perfect. All right, in the meantime, let's go to public comment then on the item. If you have a comment, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature.
Mr. Chair, could we go back to Director Hopkins, Vice Chair Hopkins' question for Adam about the MOU?
Oh yeah, my apologies. Go ahead, Adam.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I was got clued in that we were having this conversation and jumped on. So if you could let me know, I'd be happy to help any way I can.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah, so it was just regarding sort of the obligations and responsibilities as a result of joining the MOU. And specifically, I was looking at sort of the question in the staff report, which is phrased as staff recommends that the SCTA authorize the chair to sign the MOU, or wait, let's see, right, sorry, I looked at the wrong one. Shall the SCTA authorize the chair to sign an MOU establishing the mutual responsibilities in delivering the Resilient State Route 37 program? So it was kind of, what are our mutual responsibilities in delivering that program?
Are we talking about the 2019 MOU that included Caltrans and the Bay Area Tolling Authority, or are we talking about the 4 county just the 4-county MOU that I believe was from 2015 that established the Highway 37 Policy Committee.
James,
It
can you?
would be the 2019 version to be amended to include SMART.
Okay. If I could,
In the agenda packet is the amendments, Adam.
does the amendment, I'm sorry, is the amendment in the agenda packet, the proposed amendment?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
I'm sorry, if you could give me a minute, I wasn't prepared to be on this today, so I apologize.
Yeah, it's all good. Let's go to public comment in the short term. Let's see if anybody has any questions or comments for this item.
I'm not seeing any hands raised at this moment, Chair Rogers.
All right, I'll go ahead and bring it back, and I've got Director Rabbit with his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As Adam does his legal magic there, I will just say this, that the means-based tolling, which is an ongoing discussion, has been for the last year or so at the Bay Area Toll Authority, is a very hot topic. And in fact, just last week, I know our chair of MTC came back from a due diligence trip back east to those holding debt. You know, MTC obviously through BATA has about over $5 billion in debt for the bridges, primarily the Bay Bridge construction, and it is secured with tolling going forward. And part of the reason for this trip was because we were talking about the equity-based approach in the means-based tolling going forward. So I can assure you that we're pushing the limits, but being financially responsible, and the accessibility of that has been a problem. I will tell you that on behalf of Golden Gate Bridge as well. And a lot of that had to do with the software company that was in charge of some of the kinks. And as you know, there's been a couple of lawsuits regarding that, and that's also moving in a much, much better direction. I will say this, at the bus transit alone, I was looking for the presentation, and maybe Tammy or Kevin can remind me, as Suzanne mentioned, I think it's a $20 million all in if you use San Rafael as a hub, and if you use Novato as a hub, it's maybe $4 or $5, $6 million less, but that's on an annual basis. And that's a pretty significant number that also needs to be covered. So going forward, and then just on SMART, as you all know, SMART's alignment comes across parallel to 37 until it gets to the raceway, and then it heads north into Shelville and ends up going over to Sassoon. We have in the past gotten money from the state to do a back of the envelope study about expanding that capital corridor connection. There's a discussion about whether or not that's the connection and the alignment to go forward, and that'll be studied, or to, as you can imagine, put it in the middle of 37 going across on top of a causeway. You could also imagine that would probably add 50% again to the cost of the Highway 37 project to accommodate what would most likely be two tracks, two rail tracks, one in each direction at that point in time. So that's still all to be determined. And the equity piece obviously is you have status quo, and then the other side of that is to try to minimize or improve the travel time for those working folks, but also provide the option for transit, the option for rail, and then the means-based tolling, of which in this particular case, because the legislation did not go through Sacramento, only the new lane that is built can be tolled, not the existing lane. So it's an unusual situation in that regard, and that's something we're still working through going forward.
All right, thank you, Director. Adam, back to you.
Hi, great, thank you. So the main thing the agreement does originally, which doesn't really change through this amendment, is it commits the policy committee to seek funding from NTC for regional three dollars to do for different segments of the different parts of Highway 37, and then divvies up basically the lead for all of that. It replaces MTC from BATA. It adds SMART. It makes a change that the party seeks to seek legislation to amend a section of the Streets and Highway Code, and now it just modifies that a party intends to seek tolling authority between Searsport and Point Mare Island. And again, it adds smart. Otherwise, the main aspects of this MOU really just divvy up and dictate how the parties are going to work with each other, who's going to take which role, how which responsibilities, how decisions are going to be made, meetings, responsibilities, who's the project leader team, and then dealing with any potential disputes. So there's not a whole lot of commitments in this agreement from a quick read that I was able to make, other than adding smart, switching MTC for BATA, and then just kind of agreeing to work together, except for the regional funding request, which I believe already happened back in 2018. There's not really any new commitments here other than just how the parties are going to work together.
All right, with that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion from the board.
So moved, Rabbit.
And a second from?
I'll second. Fischer.
All right, a motion from Director Rabbit and a second from Director Fischer. Any additional comments? All right, let's call the vote.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fischer,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Lowe,
Yes.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And we see that motion passing.
Excellent. Go on to item 4.2, and I do want to do a quick time check before we get into it for directors. It's 4 o'clock. And
some folks who have to get to their city council meetings later tonight. With that, Madam Executive Director, 4.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David Ripperda is here to give an overview of the Hearn project and the next steps associated with it.
And good afternoon, Chair and Board of Directors. This is the US 101 Hearn Avenue Regional Multimodal Interchange Project, and have a short presentation for you. So this project is located in the city of Santa Rosa, in the southern portion of Santa Rosa. It connects the existing residential areas on the west side of 101 to the commercial areas on the east side, and it benefits a historically disadvantaged community in areas of persistent poverty in South Santa Rosa. The existing overcrossing only has one lane in each direction on Hearn Avenue, and because of that, traffic in the afternoon and the morning backs up on Highway 101 on southbound, queuing back into the main line of Highway 101, which is a safety risk. The congestion and the lack of shoulders also delays emergency response time, and there are no sidewalks on the north side of the overcrossing and a discontinuous sidewalk on the south side, and no bike facilities on the overcrossing. The overcrossing also has non-standard vertical clearance over 101 and does not have crash-worthy bridge railings. The proposed project would widen the overcrossing by demolishing the old bridge and building a new one that would be 4 lanes wide and have bicycle facilities and sidewalks. And it would also include a second right turn lane from the off-ramp to Hearn Avenue to get to the bridge. And in addition, with the addition of a class 4 two-way multi-use bikeway, it will provide a safe connectivity for bicyclists across 101. The board back in September also approved funding to apply for OBAG 3 for the city through MTC to build a multi-use path that connect between the project and the existing smart path just to the west of this project. Here you can see a cross-section of the proposed improvements. This includes a westbound class 2 bicycle lane, 2 lanes in each direction, and a center left turn lane on the overcrossing, a 4-foot shoulder on the eastbound direction, and then a raised concrete buffer that will provide safety between the shoulder and the 2-way class 4 bikeway on the south side of the overcrossing. And on each side of the overcrossing, there'll be a 6-foot sidewalk for pedestrians. The project started environmental back in 2014 and completed the environmental phase in 2016. Final design for the project started in 2017 and is due to be complete in March of 2023, next year. The project is essentially shovel ready pending the availability of funding, so that it can start construction and go out to bid next summer. Here's the proposed funding plan for the project. We've been working closely with city staff to come up with funding for the project. Over the last few years, the city has been competing for discretionary federal and state funds. However, they have not been able to realize those applications yet. SCTA has partnered with the city to try to apply for funds through the CDC for the Senate Bill 1 local partnership program. And before Thanksgiving, we submitted a request for $8.6 million for this project, combined with the $5 million in the formulaic portion of the local partnership program the board approved back in September, and combined with a significant contribution from Measure M and other state and city funds. We believe we have a funding package to be able to deliver on this project. This is a total project cost of $43.6 million, and the construction phase will be $36.6 million. As part of our next steps, as I mentioned earlier, we just submitted an application for the Senate Bill 1 local partnership competitive program to the California Transportation Commission on the 29th of November. The awards for that program are going to be announced in June of next year. If that award is not granted, the city has also agreed to provide funding to make up for that grant if it is not awarded, including $8.6 million from the city's general fund reserves. This SCTA staff have been negotiating an agreement to solidify that commitment with the city of Santa Rosa, and also working on a cooperative agreement with Caltrans for Caltrans to deliver the project through construction. In the coming months, in February, we plan to bring before you an action on Measure M expenditure plan amendment. This will include increasing the Measure M local streets projects amount for Hearn Avenue as committed to by the board in previous actions. The project will be ready to list for construction in April of next year, and that will allow the project to be bid in the summer and start construction in the spring of 2024 and be complete by 2025. So the staff recommendation is subject to the review of our legal counsel that you authorize staff to negotiate and have the chair execute the agreement with the city of Santa Rosa, and authorize staff to negotiate and the chair to execute a cooperative agreement with Caltrans, and adopt resolution number 2022-035. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much, David. And just to add a little bit of context for folks, this is the project that we talked about with OBAG 3 that was not eligible ultimately for funding, even though it was highly rated, specifically because it does increase vehicle miles traveled just by virtue of having an added lane. The project, as you saw, also adds a really critical bike and pedestrian network across 101 in an area that really desperately needs it. It aligns with our new Hearn community hub that will be the fire station with a library and with a community center. And then it also furthers our critical evacuation routes across that network and down the South Santa Rosa Avenue, Petaluma Hill area. We have kicked off discussions with the county, as I'm sure Director Corsi can talk about as well, for the annexation of Moreland. And this is really critical infrastructure for us to be able to deliver for those residents to get this project built. So with that, I'll kick it over to Director Corsi.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. I'm not a huge fan of adding pavement, but in this case, this is something that is very necessary and long overdue. It connects the southwest side of Santa Rosa, the southern part of Roseland, the northern access to the Moreland area, as Chris Rogers just said, with the commercial and job-rich east side of southern Santa Rosa. It also eventually connects with downtown Santa Rosa. One thing that wasn't mentioned during the presentation and was that the one sidewalk that does exist across this bridge is so narrow that a person cannot walk with two bags. I see people inching along sideways to get across there. And it's pathetic that in these times in which we live, people have to do that to get across a piece of so-called infrastructure in a modern city. I would not ride a bicycle over this. And I ride my bicycle on some pretty narrow roads, but I would not do it here. This is a problem that I believe at one point was identified as a region-wide project or something like that. Maybe Suzanne can help me with the terminology, but it's not necessarily a local project. Is that right, Suzanne?
It is a local project, but it has regional impact. So you have to go through the regional air quality conformity process. So there are regional aspects to it for sure.
All right. And just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, this is an equity project as well, and very seriously needed. Thanks.
Any other questions from directors? All right, let's go to public comment on the item.
Oh, sorry, it's sharing my screen. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right, so I see see Eris with her hand up. Eris, I have permitted you to, whoops. I've got the wrong screen, my apologies.
It's all good. We trust Eris to stay under 3 minutes.
There you go. All right, Eris, I permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'll try to stay in 3 minutes. Unlike Mr. Corsi, I have ridden across that thing, and I would never do it again because it was one of the scariest things I've ever done, riding across that. So this is very much needed. I mean, we need multiple ways to get across 101. That's one of our biggest challenges, the cycling around the city. So this is going to be a vast improvement for pedestrians and cyclists. That said, I'm not a huge fan of two-way cycle tracks that then dump onto a street that does not have that same facility. So while the way the project is laid out, and the Santa Rosa staff and folks have heard all of my ideas about this, so I won't bore all of you by going into all of the details. The experience of crossing the bridge is going to be orders of magnitude enhanced with this project. I have a little bit of concern about what happens when you come across the bridge from the west and you get dumped onto Santa Rosa Avenue off a two-way cycle track onto the existing roadway. And I would love to see protected cycle track on both sides, not just one side. But those things aside, this is a very good project. I also had really mixed feelings at first about the fact that some funding is being moved from the 101 overcrossing to make this happen, but have sort of become convinced by the arguments that, well, isn't one project finished better than two projects waiting for more money? And so, you know, every opportunity to get across that freeway in a more safe way is good in my book. I think that's it. And I'm way under 3 minutes. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Eris. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who have their hands up to speak on this item.
Okay, I'll bring it back then, and I'll look for a motion.
To make a motion, we adopt resolution 2022-035.
I'd be happy to second that.
Perfect. A motion from Director Giudice and a second from Director Landman. Any additional comments? Let's call the vote.
Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Fischer.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Kelly.
Yes.
Director Landman.
Yes.
Director Lowe.
Yes. Sorry.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Reynosa.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
And Chair Rogers.
Absolutely.
And we see that motion passing.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. We'll go on to item 4.3.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. This is Tanya Nareth, and I'm here to give the board a brief update on the work that RCPA is doing related to carbon sequestration. So let me share my screen. All right. So today I'm going to give you a brief overview of the work that RCPA is doing, provide some context in terms of a background on carbon sequestration, where we're at in terms of data, and how all of this ties into our Sonoma climate mobilization strategy, and then conclude with an update on current projects that we're working on. So after providing some background on sequestration, I will share an update on our work and then conclude with a chance for you all to ask any questions that you might have about the work we're doing, and also provide any inputs in terms of how RCPA could best support your jurisdictions in their sequestration efforts. So to begin, wanted to share some background on what's referred to as the carbon cycle, which is the process of carbon moving between living organisms, minerals in the earth, and the atmosphere. And this image here shows you how the carbon flows between these different points in the cycle. Most of the carbon on the earth is stored in rocks and sediments. The rest is stored in the ocean, the atmosphere, and in living organisms. So this piece of the diagram that I've circled in red indicates the burning of fossil fuels by humans, which we refer to here as anthropogenic carbon. And this has upset the balance of the carbon cycle on the earth. So to restore this balance requires us to stop burning fossil fuels and to increase our carbon sequestration. And there's two ways that we can increase that sequestration. One is through geologic methods, which basically are methods that store CO2 in underground geologic formations. And these require technologies and energy to convert the CO2 in the atmosphere into a form that can be injected and stored underground. And then the second type of sequestration is biologic. And this is the storage of CO2 in vegetation, soils, woody products, and aquatic environments like our ocean. And this second method is the focus of RCPA's work on sequestration. So this image may be familiar to you. It's one that I shared back when the board was receiving an update on CARB's scoping plan. The plan has now been released in a final version, and this diagram simply shows the different sources and sinks of carbon and the way that we look at these at a state level, and points out the opportunity to both increase sequestration through natural methods on our working lands, and also calls out that depending on our land management practices, our natural and working lands and urban spaces can also become sources of carbon, which we definitely want to avoid. So how does this relate to RCPA's carbon sequestration or CO goal for 2030? So in our mobilization strategy, we set a goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. And here you see that in 2020, or the results of our 2020 GHG inventory showed that we'd reached almost 23% below 1990 levels. And to reach our 2030 goal means that we need to reduce emissions 80% below and then sequester that remaining carbon. And that is about 750,000 metric tons CO2 equivalent annually by 2030 is what that number equates to. So in terms of different types of carbon removal and sequestration, this is another image from CARB's scoping plan that I think does a good job of illustrating the different types of sequestration that we have. So there's two types of removal strategies, carbon capture and storage, which is essentially a method that is paired with a fossil fuel powered plant, like a gas power plant, and it captures that CO2 and stores it safely away. And this is not a well-proven or a method that's used very frequently yet, but it is one that there's a lot of research going into. And then second, carbon dioxide removal is basically pulling carbon from the air, from the atmosphere, through two different means, one mechanical and one nature-based. And I won't go into details about the mechanical, but that, as you can imagine, requires chemical and energy-intensive processes to capture that carbon. And where RCPA is really focused in our mobilization strategy is around the nature-based solution. So again, working with our natural and working lands, as well as starting to look at our urban spaces for their sequestration potential. So to track our progress towards our 2030 goal and ensure that we have the most effective projects and programs in place to achieve this goal, we need better data on how much carbon our urban and rural lands store and what their potential is to increase sequestration to meet that goal that we have for 2030. So there's two previous studies that we looked to that demonstrate this goal is feasible. So there's RCPA's Climate Action 2020 and Beyond that was published in 2016, and it estimated that our natural and working lands could sequester an additional 17 million metric tons of CO2 over the time period, and would also provide many co-benefits, including enhanced productivity and water holding capacity of our soils, very important in the drought. And then the second study is one that was done by the Nature Conservancy and the Sonoma County Ag Preservation and Open Space District, the Climate Action Through Conservation Study. And it looked at the amount of carbon that could be sequestered in different land cover classes, so agriculture, grassland, shrubland, and forest, and concluded that over the time period from 1990 to 2010, we increased carbon sequestration in the county by more than 15 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent, and that this was primarily due to the expansion of forest cover in the county during that time. Now, we need a much better understanding of how the wildfires in 2017, 2019, and 2020 impacted carbon sequestration in the county, as well as more data on the potential of urban sequestration to help us meet our goals. And so that leads me to this third area here, which is a countywide carbon inventory and sequestration potential study that's planned for 2023. And this is a project that the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, along with the County of Sonoma's Climate Action and Resiliency Division, are developing to basically conduct this study. And RCPA is participating in a working group that's developing an RFP to launch this study in 2023. And so this will give us both a quantitative estimate of existing carbon that's stored in our landscape, as well as projections and estimates of how much could be stored in all of our different landscapes in the future. So that will be very important data for us to consider. So now looking to our mobilization strategies and how all this ties in, I've listed the 3 strategies from the mobilization strategy that address carbon sequestration. So the first is to protect existing carbon stocks. So basically, what are the management practices on our landscapes that we can deploy to maintain the carbon that is currently held in the soil and plants? And then strategy 8, which is to increase our carbon stocks, so capturing more carbon in our soils and plants. And there's a variety of different methods that we know about to do that require funding and resources. And then lastly, to scale up the infrastructure for sequestration, which is really all about the resources that we need, primarily funding and a trained workforce to implement the projects that we envision to increase sequestration. So there's 3 projects that RCPA is currently involved in, which I've listed here on this slide, and I'll go into more detail on these in the subsequent slides, but just to show how these different projects map into our 3 strategies. So we have the tree protection report that both looks at how to preserve existing carbon stocks and also actions that could be taken to increase carbon stocks. We have a carbon sequestration pilot project, and lastly, a new project that just recently was awarded tentative funding, which is a collaboration between a variety of different organizations in Sonoma and Marin counties. So I'll go through these in a little bit more detail on the next slides. So first, in terms of our tree protection ordinance and recommendations draft report, this is a report led by BC and the RCPA, where we've worked with our member jurisdictions to evaluate the status of local tree protection ordinances and completed several tasks. One is to create a catalog of the tree protection ordinances in Sonoma County and to display them in a comparative matrix. A second is to create a draft report with recommendations and additional resources that are designed to help jurisdictions look at their tree protection ordinances as they're starting to update them or modify them, so to provide background information there. And then also start to create a collaborative network of local staff who are working on these issues who can continue to work together in the future as we look at updating these ordinances. So a draft of this report is now being reviewed by local jurisdiction staff and will be presented to the December 15th SCTA Planning Advisory Committee for feedback, as well as to our January 13th RCPA Climate Action Advisory Committee. And our plan is to bring the final draft of this report to this board in February for your review and input before we finalize it. The next project that we're involved in is a carbon sequestration pilot project. In 2021, RCPA partnered with a long list of local organizations, including the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, the Resource Conservation Districts, Zero Waste Sonoma, Carbon Cycle Institute, and Daily Acts, to submit a proposal to the County of Sonoma's Climate Resiliency Fund for a carbon sequestration pilot project. And this project was approved for funding in February of 2022. And RCPA is playing a role of coordination and project reporting for this effort. And the goal of the project is essentially to complete compost application on at least five community and agricultural sites, to track data on the application of that compost and to be able to report out our results by the end of 2023. And compost is one of the recommended practices to increase sequestration, basically helps the soil absorb more sequestration and has a number of other co-benefits. In addition to the actual application of compost, this project includes a very important component of community education on those community sites so that we can share more with the community about the benefits of sequestration, how community members can apply some of these techniques in their own yards and communities. We're also using an equity assessment tool that has been developed by the County of Sonoma to make sure that we are integrating equity into the project. So that's what I have on that project. And then lastly, this is the project that is a joint effort between a number of organizations in Sonoma County and Marin County. And it was recently awarded $10 million, a tentative award from the USDA to fund this partnership work. This is an effort that is being administered by the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division, and they are in the process right now of finalizing the grant agreement with the USDA. And essentially, the project has a goal of leveraging successful carbon farming and local and regional food systems partnerships and programs across both counties to create a regional supply chain and tracking system and marketing campaign to basically increase demand for these climate-friendly agricultural products and practices, and that these would support the climate goals that both Marin County and Sonoma County have. And so our role in the project is fairly small. We will be working to integrate the data that's tracked out of this project into our greenhouse gas methodology for the inventory, and to work with our partners in Marin County to make sure that we're being consistent in how we're reporting that data. And the plan for this project is to launch in the spring of 2023 with a 5-year timeline. So that concludes my presentation, and I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for any comments or questions from the board. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanya. I'll look to the board and see, are there any questions to start? All right, let's go to public comment then.
Confirming, Chair Rogers, I do not see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
All right, I'll bring it back. This was a report item, so I'll see if there's any comments from the board before we move on to our next item. All right, Tanya, thank you so much for the update. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And let's go on to item 4.4.
Good afternoon, Chair Rogers. My name is BC Caps. I'm going to share my screen. And just confirming, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So good afternoon, Chair Rogers and members of the board. My name is BC Caps. I'm a climate change program specialist here at RCPA. It's my pleasure today to provide you with some background information on an international proposal to develop a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty and to seek your approval to endorse this effort. And so this campaign was started in 2019 and is patterned on the successful nuclear ban treaty previously adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. This new international policy proposal advocates for the rapid transition away from coal, oil, and gas production and use. It is designed to complement existing international agreements, such as the 1992 UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Climate Accords from 2015. This effort was initially funded through a Climate Breakthrough Award and is being led by a global steering committee and an international support team. The proposal for this new treaty is based on 3 key pillars that are guiding its development. First is the concept of non-proliferation in general, or more simply stated, as ending all exploration and production of coal, oil, and gas, as these are the key greenhouse gas polluters. Second is a need for the fair phase out of the existing fossil fuel stockpiles at a pace that is in line with the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius of global temperature rise. And lastly is the call to make this global shift to 100% renewable energy in a just and equitable fashion that does not leave any workers, communities, or countries behind in the transition. This effort to build support for the Non-Proliferation Treaty has been growing over the past 3 years, in addition to the 2 nation states and 70 subnational governments that have endorsed the effort so far, over 100 Nobel laureates and 1,800 civil service and civil organizations have joined the call. Within California, the cities of Richmond, Hayward, Los Angeles, and Santa Ana have all endorsed the effort, as well as Sonoma County's own city of Sebastopol. An endorsement by the RCPA board today would encourage more local jurisdictions to review and endorse the initiative. If the treaty is ultimately successful, it would assist RCPA in our climate change efforts due to the fact that the international community will have taken serious action concerning a much needed phase out of fossil fuels. As far as next steps for the treaty initiative, sponsors are currently building support through a broad global coalition. Scientific research would then be used to develop the recommendations of the shape and the content of the proposed non-proliferation treaty. Finally, formal diplomatic engagements would be needed to codify the final language for the treaty for adoption by an international governing bodies such as the United Nations or at an upcoming COP meeting focused on climate change. And that leaves me with my final questions for discussion by the board today. Shall the RCPA Board of Directors endorse this call for an international treaty to phase out the extraction and use of fossil fuels with a just transition for workers and their families? Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the chair of the board may have about this proposal.
All right, thanks, BC. Do we have any questions from the board? All right, let's go and see if the public has any questions on it.
Confirming, Chair Rogers, that I do not see any members of the public with their hands raised right now.
All right, great job, BC. Made it so nobody had any questions. Let's go ahead and see if we've got a motion from the directors.
Let's endorse it.
Second.
So that's a motion from Director Giudice, I'll take it as.
Yes, sir.
And a second from Director Kelly. Any additional comments? Silly remarks? All right, let's call the vote.
Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Fischer.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Kelly.
Yes.
Director Landman.
Yes.
Director Lowe.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Reynosa.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And we see that motion passing.
All right, thanks, BC. Madam Executive Director, let's go to item 4.5.
All right, I'm going to hand this over to Ross Clendenin, who will give an update on where we are with the funding for climate effort.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen. Is that correct, Drew?
Yep. Oh, wait, no, other way. There we go. It looks good now.
So good afternoon, directors. The following is an update on the Funding for Climate Change Ad Hoc Committee activity. The Funding for Climate Ad Hoc Committee finalized the charter for the new Funding for Climate Change Committee in October. RCPA staff formally launched the Funding for Climate Change Initiative in late October with the first meeting of the steering committee. The Funding for Climate Change Steering Committee will provide regular updates to the RCPA board as it develops its recommendations on climate solution for the board's consideration. RCPA staff also facilitated the first meeting of the Government Partners Committee in early December. As is shown, leads and staff support personnel for the committees have been selected. The first Funding for Climate Change Steering Committee meeting was held on October 31st to define roles, finalize the charter, and discuss details and timing moving forward. The steering committee will meet quarterly, receiving input from the program committees with the goal to deliver recommendations to the RCPA board in December of 2023. And RCPA is preparing for the public launch of the initiative at a community meeting on December 14th. This meeting will be conducted in English with Spanish interpretation. RCPA is promoting the event through email, newsletters, and social media. The agenda will include an overview of the Funding for Climate Change Initiative, introductions of the steering committee members, and an invitation to join one or more program committees: transportation, buildings, land, and water. The program committees will begin meeting in early 2023. Please let me know if you need any information about attending virtually or in person on Wednesday evening, and we hope to see you there. And in terms of public engagement activities, in early November, RCPA submitted a proposal to the Community Foundation. Actually, yeah, looking at the wrong screen, apologies. Submitted a proposal to the Community Foundation of Sonoma County for funding to support deeper integration of environmental justice into the work of the Funding for Climate Change Committee. The Community Foundation supported the proposal and agreed to fund it with a $38,000 grant. RCPA staff will prepare an RFP for a consultant to provide environmental justice training and consultation services to the steering committee and program committee members. And now, public engagement surrounding funding for climate efforts continued with presentations to the North Bay Leadership Council and the Rohnert Park Chamber of Commerce. The Funding for Climate Change video was also completed. This video is featured in messaging and communications promoting the December 4th community meeting. Sonoma SEM, a call to action presentations will continue as new opportunities arise. And I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair. Please let me know if there are any questions regarding this Funding for Climate Change Ad Hoc Committee update. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ross. See if there's any comments or questions from the board. Director Corsi.
Ross, if you'd like to send information about the meeting on Wednesday to my office, we'll put it out on our channels too.
Thank you very much. I'll do that shortly.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, Drew, let's go to public comment. If you're interested in providing comment, hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom.
Confirming right now, Chair Rogers, that I do not see any members of the public with their hands up.
All right, let's go to our, I'll bring it back to the board to see if there's any last comments. Seeing none, Madam Executive Director, let's go to items 5.1, our Executive Committee reports.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Executive Committee did not meet this month. Are there any regional agency reports from any of the board members who serve on regional bodies?
Director Rabbit.
Yeah, just a couple of quick facts and figures from the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, the bridge only relying on bridge toll revenue and fares. It has no other taxing authority. Bridge traffic is about 86% of what was pre-COVID. Bus traffic, 35%. Ferry traffic, about 21%. That peaked, ferry's a little seasonal. It peaked at 29% in June, was 18% last January. So we're a little better than we were then, but not much. Bus was about 27% last January, now at 35, like I said. In October of 22, 1.4 million vehicles did cross the bridge. They are crossing the bridge at different hours. AM, PM peak periods of time are much, much different. San Francisco still has about 25% downtown office vacancy, plus what you would consider the new flex schedules are. So there's a lot less people going into downtown San Francisco, that's for sure. So just interesting going forward. The bridge is embarking on a 5-year financial strategic plan. And as chair of the finance committee, that's in my bailiwick going forward. We did receive through all the different COVID relief packages, nearly $119 million, obviously much needed, as same as the case for all the different transit agencies. And going forward, I think I mentioned this before, since there's probably not going to be any further federal funds to bail out transit agencies, and a lot of transit agencies are still in the hole, like BART, like VTA, and others. There is a look in Sacramento to allocate unallocated cap and trade dollars for a period of up to 5 years to smooth out whatever needs to take place through attrition and or quote unquote right sizing of transit agencies so that they don't hit that fiscal cliff that is always just around the corner when things change as drastically as they have. And that's it. That's pretty much true on a lot of all the transit agencies, except for the local service. And Marin County local service is actually one of the overachievers right now. But the local service is doing well, but the longer commute services are not. SMART is also doing well. I should say that, although we're not back to our pre-COVID numbers there either. So appreciate that opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Director. Let's go to Director Hopkins.
Thank you. I just want to share an update from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We met in closed session last week to interview APCO candidates, and we are hoping to be able to announce the final selection of the leader of the organization next Wednesday, the 21st, at our next board meeting. So fingers crossed that we'll be able to share that. I'm also going to be moving on to the executive committee next year. And so I really look forward to kind of participating in that process, but then also introducing the new APCO to Suzanne and sort of whoever would be appropriate within staff at SCTA and RCPA, because that's a good potential partner, just like the Golden Gate Bridge District. So I just want to share that information. There's also some exciting rulemaking coming down the pipeline, including considering zero NOx appliances, which sort of de facto at this point would mean all electric appliances Bay Area wide. That's something under consideration. And also wood burning is something that is going to be looked at more closely by the board as well.
Great, thanks, Director. Any other updates from the board? All right, let's keep moving through our updates.
All right, the advisory committee agendas were included in the board packet, and we can move then to the staff reports from the marketing and communications activities. I think Ross is here to go through that.
Thank you very much. Hello again, directors. The following is a brief overview of communications and outreach activity during the previous month. RCPA SCTA staff completed a new communications and engagement plan with feedback from managers. This plan provides an overview of the goals, techniques, and principles that SCTA and RCPA will use to inform and engage the public during the coming year. SCTA RCPA staff strives to reach as many different sectors of the community as possible and capture their voices and feedback as it relates to transportation and climate issues. Members of the Funding for Climate Ad Hoc Committee were filmed earlier in the year discussing current and upcoming efforts by RCPA to generate funding for local climate solutions. This interview footage, along with shots of Sonoma County jurisdictions and climate impacts, were combined to create a 5-minute video that ties in with work towards a climate funding measure. A Spanish captioned version was also created for maximum accessibility. The video was submitted to Sonoma Water for the Blue Zone Pavilion at the recent COP27 climate conference and will be used in future funding for climate change efforts. RCPA staff presented a slide deck detailing funding for climate change efforts at the North Bay Leadership Council virtual lunch meeting on October 19th at the Rohnert Park Chamber of Commerce and Chamber of Commerce meeting on November 2nd. The presentations focused on the climate crisis facing Sonoma County and the RCPA's role in implementing climate solutions. As mentioned earlier, a hybrid meeting informing the public about moving forward towards a climate measure will be held on December 14th at the SCP Advanced Energy Center. Interested members of the public are encouraged to sign up for committees that will work in 2023 to deliver communications or to deliver recommendations to the board. Please let me know if you have any questions regarding communications, outreach, or engagement activities. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
You want to keep going through them, Suzanne, and then we'll take questions?
Absolutely. The climate change activities report is BC today.
Hello again, Chair Rogers and members of the board. I'm here to present an overview of some of the RCPA activities from the last month. Starting first with work on our Sonoma climate mobilization strategy. We have completed a research report on the use of hydrogen fueling as a strategy to decarbonize transportation for both light duty and heavy duty vehicles. And this has been a major policy focus at the state level, although Sonoma County has been more focused on electric vehicles up until this point. And I wanted to specifically thank staff from the city of Roanoke Park for their feedback and review of the document. This was very useful during the process as they are determining how to move forward with some proposals that have come into the city for an expansion for installation of hydrogen fueling pumps within the jurisdiction. So wanted to thank the city staff there. And a link to this report has been included as a supporting document within the agenda packet. So next, we also finalized our draft survey of tree protection ordinances, which Tanya mentioned earlier. This was conducted in partnership with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. And I've been working with a graduate student researcher from the University of Colorado at Boulder. This report will be presented to our Planning Advisory Committee on Thursday, and we hope to bring a final version of the report to the board in February. Let's see. Tanya spoke about the our carbon sequestration pilot project in detail, so I don't need to go into that. Moving on to items related to our members and partners, we held our bi-monthly networking meeting this month with representatives from all the jurisdictions. This included presentations on recent building energy modeling work that's being done by the city of Petaluma, as well as information on funding opportunities for local government through the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, which a number of ourselves and a number of jurisdictions are watching very carefully for funding opportunities over the next upcoming years. We've also continued our coordination meetings with the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division, along with Sonoma Clean Power, looking at how to align our work between the three organizations for the maximum benefit. In September, I presented the greenhouse gas inventory to this board, you may remember, and we have recently completed a frequently asked questions document that is based on questions that this board asked, as well as our Climate Action Advisory Committee had asked during the presentations. And so that has been posted to our website, and it's also been included as a document, as an attachment as part of the board packet. I'll give some follow-up questions, answers to some of the questions that were asked. And let's see, finally, in our work coordinating local efforts with the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, we've been continuing to partner with the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division, who has recently announced a series of public workshops for homeowners on energy upgrades and installing solar. And those workshops will be held in January and February. The team there also hosted 2 workshops for building contractors and energy professionals on the new California building codes that are coming into effect on January 1st. And to wrap things up, our Bay Aren Water Upgrade SAVE program continues to make great progress in both the cities of Sebastopol and in Cloverdale. The program is now offering recirculation pumps as an installation option based upon feedback from multiple customers. A Spanish language customer video is being produced to broaden the outreach efforts for that program. And the team continues to engage with several prospective water utilities with the goal of growing the program further and bringing in more water utilities as partners in 2023. So that is my report for the day. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Chris Barney on the planning activities report.
Thanks, Suzanne, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. I'm happy to be here today to provide an update on our planning activities over the last month or so. So on the data and forecasting side, I've been working with our modeling consultants on scoping out model improvements for 2023, and also looking at the possibility of updating some of the information and metrics in the Sonoma County Travel Behavior Study. We've also worked with the Department of Health Services to get the Vision Zero Advisory Committee together in November. So that group works on implementation of the Vision Zero action plan. And at this last meeting, we discussed progress in adopting the plan, safety data, cannabis impacts on traffic safety, bikeway safety, funding opportunities, and recent safety legislation. So the plan is to get that group together every quarter to discuss safety issues and discuss implementation of the action plan. We've also been working on developing an RFP and project scope for the countywide active transportation plan. So hope to get that RFP out sometime soon and get a consultant on board to help out with development of that project. In the meantime, we've been working with local staff to update the existing conditions in preparation for work on that plan. And then finally, an RFP or request for proposals is out for the integrated transit service study. And we're expecting to get proposals back for that project next week and bring back a task order for that project next February. So work is proceeding on that. So looking forward to seeing that go forward next spring. So that's my report. Thank you. I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Chair, last but not least, we've got James Cameron with projects and programming.
Thank you. So a brief update on our projects and programming since our last board meeting. The Highway 101 corridor, the Marin Sonoma Narrows C2 project, which is the widening through Petaluma. We did have a celebration hosted by SMART and the city of Petaluma for the opening of the multi-use path between Payrin and South Point Boulevard, and celebrated that. Also on that project, as we're working towards wrapping up, we have addressed all of our budget issues with regard to construction capital. We are still working with Caltrans to address support costs, both for final right-of-way mapping as well as the mitigation and monitoring and project closeout. Mitigation monitoring for that project, as required by the resource agencies, is going to go on for the next decade to report back out on plant establishment. Our 116-121 project is moving forward, looking at a March CTC allocation vote to go to bid later in 2023. Also, the SCTA board can expect in 2023 a couple of actions under Measure M. The first will be the Measure M annual report in early 23, summarizing our accomplishments in fiscal year 22, as well as an expenditure plan amendment is going to be proposed to the board after it goes through the committees to address funding on Hearn, the status of the Forestville project, as well as the 116-121 intersection improvements. Lastly, I'd point out to the directors in the projects and programming report under the shop, there was some correspondence between Caltrans. There's a little bit of delay on their side. The letter that we sent in February was responded to in October of this year with regard to the shop program. Caltrans is committed to work with us as they advance the program. And with the 2024 shop program going into development in 2023, staff will be working with them to advance this board's interests, as well as the robust list that's in the back of the packet, which covers their entire shop program in Sonoma County. With that, it concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just had one quick thing. I just wanted to make sure the board was aware that our next meeting is February 6th. Given the holiday in February and the holidays at the end of this year, it made sense to sort of consolidate the January-February meeting, and it is February 6th, so not the typical timing. Just want to make you aware of that.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. I'll look to the board. Were there any questions for our staff reports today? Let's see if there's any public comment.
I'm confirming, Chair Rogers, that I do not see any members of the public who wish to speak on these items.
All right, I'm going to bring it back, and then to round out our meeting tonight, we have our announcements from directors. I have two quick ones, if you'll indulge me. The first was earlier today. Santa Rosa had a chance to cut the ribbon on our first zero emission buses. So we have 4 that will be hitting the streets this week. We have another 5 that have been ordered and another 6 that we have funding for, both for the utility work as well as the buses. So that's 15 or 16 out of the 28 that we have currently. So more than halfway there are expected to be on the streets by 2024. And want to thank SCTA and Sonoma Clean Power for their partnership in getting the expertise behind that. The other announcement that I have, and I'm glad she's still on the Zoom, is I hope the board will join me in congratulating Nancy Adams from our Transportation and Public Works Department. After 32 years with the city of Santa Rosa, she is rounded out her career here at the end for the city. And we couldn't have done a lot of what we've done here in Santa Rosa, including getting our scooter system and our bikes up and running here. 32 years is a long time, and I know she's got a lot of accomplishments. And so I hope you'll congratulate Nancy on a well-deserved end of her tenure here in Santa Rosa. With that, I'll kick it over to Director Rabbit, followed by Director Kelly.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I just wanted to let you know that the Clipper Bay Pass, that program that relates, as it relates to SRJC pilot program, that was the program that allowed college students at selected schools, and specifically those schools that had a transit pass program in place, to receive a pass that would allow you to be on public transit anywhere within the 9-county Bay Area. The program allowed distribution to students at the start of the school year in the fall. And I was contacted by SRJC President Frank Chong, who wanted to amend the program to offer fall and spring, since at the SRJC, more students actually start in spring than the fall. And we thought we could reach more people. And I'm happy to say that through a series of a few meetings with MTC staff, we did negotiate an acceptable agreement to do so based on those unique arguments made by the JC. And 3,000 more passes are available for distribution for a total of 5,000 going forward. So just want to say thank you to SRJC for reaching out to MTC staff, and specifically the great Alex Bockelman, who made that happen for us here in the North Bay. Also, real quickly, since we're talking about the electrification and greening of our fleets, interestingly enough, I'm looking at a brochure of one of our, at Golden Gate Bridge, we've been getting a lot of discussion regarding the electrification of the ferry fleet. And so there was a contingent sent to Norway, not me, that looked at alternative fuel ferries and what they can do going forward. And very interesting stuff. Not quite there yet, to be honest, because of the speed associated with that's required to attract the commuters to use the ferry in the first place, and the convenience and the recharging time and the infrastructure, obviously, that needs to go there. But I would imagine after the next purchase, I know that we are setting aside money to replace one vessel, but the vessel following will be more in line with some sort of new alternative fuel vessel going forward. So I just wanted to report that out and appreciate the time.
Thank you, Director. We'll go to Director Kelly.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. I just wanted to update everyone that the City of Healdsburg is launching our climate mobilization strategy. This is one of the goals of our City Council, and we will be kicking off that process tonight at 6 p.m. in Healdsburg. And I look forward to sharing back, and our SCTA, RCPA community liaisons are also very actively involved in that work. So excited to have the CAAC also kind of helping to engage and bringing some of the findings and outcomes from other cities that you all have led and other residents that sit on the CAAC, the Climate Action Advisory Committee, to bring through our Healdsburg reps back to our community. So thank you so much to all of you, and looking forward to sharing some action.
Excellent. Good luck, Director Kelly. Are there any other announcements today? Let's go to public comment then on director announcements and see if there's any hands.
Confirming, Chair Rogers, I don't see any members of the public with their hands up on this item.
All right, then we'll say one final thank you and congratulations to Directors Landman and Fischer. And with that, we will adjourn.
Thank you, directors. Thank you, Director
Happy
Landman and
holidays.
Fischer.